Now, up next, I'm very happy to introduce Liz Barrow, who is a research specialist at the European Space Agency, and she's going to give us more information on the ESA initiative to tender on space resources, which was mentioned already on Monday. Liz, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Hello, and thanks for having me. So yeah, today I'm here to tell you about a new competition from the European Space Agency. It's on the topic of space resources, so highly relevant. And this competition launched on Monday, so Monday the 19th of April, and will be open until the end of June 2021. So you can already check out the webpage and you can submit a proposal anytime from now until the end of June. Now, the main aim of this competition is to support successful teams in developing products and services that are relevant to industries on Earth today and have potential for future application in space. So we've tried to highlight here the important, the key messages. The competition really focuses on the development of services on Earth first. Yes, we want to see that they are relevant to a future in space, but firstly, we want to test that the technology works and that there's a business case in various sectors on Earth. So, let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so okay. So about the Space Resources competition, if you decide to apply for the Space Resources competition and you're successful, you'll receive 100% funding of up to €200,000 to run a 12-month study. And during this year, you'll be looking at engaging with users and customers on Earth to try and understand their needs, requirements. You'll be assessing the technical feasibility of your product or service, developing a proof of concept with feedback from the users that you've reached out to. You'd be looking at developing a business model and developing your business plan. And perhaps most importantly, you'd be looking at a roadmap. So how do you take your idea from an idea phase to roll it out on that sector in Earth? And then how would you propose to take it into space in the future? So why have we decided to have this competition? What's the relevance? If we look at a future of space exploration, one thing's for certain, that we cannot be in a situation where we're having to ferry resources from Earth into space. So we need to be able to extract and use resources in situ with ISRU. Now, although this concept is quite futuristic, we believe that it has great potential for creating new opportunities in different sectors on Earth. We believe that it can encourage the development of new technologies, new services that can improve sustainability, tackle the issue of resource scarcity, and address sustainable development goals on Earth. So what we did was speak to various companies and organizations in various sectors, but it did focus predominantly on the mining and extractive industry sector, to think about what kind of topics were of relevance on Earth today, but could be relevant to a future in space. One thing to note here, so we've come up with these 5 topics, but there are several other potential opportunities to explore. And one key message here is to say, although we've established these 5, we're very open to receiving other ideas for products and services, as long as they can be applied on Earth in the near term and are applicable to space in the future. But if we go through these one by one, and I think quite a lot of this was actually covered earlier on in the session by Serkan and Dale, so try and keep it short. But if we look at the first one, looking at reducing water usage in mining operations. Now, if we look at mining on Earth, we can see that currently mining operations use considerable amounts of water, and this can create tensions between mining companies and the local communities. It can be a huge sustainability challenge for these mining companies. So Now mining companies are trying to look into new ways of mining that uses low or zero water processing methods. If we look at space in the future, there's a similar scenario where we have water being a very precious resource, and it's actually a scarce resource in certain cases. So if we think about mining in the future in space, we can't have a scenario where the mining equipment is reliant on the presence of water, because that's simply not sustainable or possible in the long term. So this is one scenario where developing mining methods that don't rely on water is of relevance both on Earth and in space. The second topic covers effective energy generation and storage. So if we consider mining operations, they are often undertaken in very remote regions. It can be very expensive to connect mining sites to the grid. And we see mining companies now looking at new methods of generating power. And they're turning quite a lot to renewable methods, and especially solar. So if we consider the in-space scenario, it's likely that equipment in space may be solar powered. So here, any ideas that focus on effective energy generation and storage using solar or other methods, we talked about nuclear earlier in this session, would be highly beneficial to receive. The third topic is perfecting remote and autonomous operations. Now, if we consider the use case on a mine or at an offshore oil rig or in space, we are looking at very remote operations that could benefit from autonomy or from control at a distance. So ideas here that look at developing and improving current autonomous operations would be great. The fourth point is looking at light, agile, and precise mining technologies. Because currently mining can be inefficient, it can be wasteful, it involves large machinery that's actually moving a whole lot of earth to try and find the valuable material. It can negatively impact the surrounding areas. So what we'd be looking at here would be new methods of mining with smaller, lighter, more precise mining machines that could easily target the resource that you're going after. If we take this into the space environment, it's completely unlikely that we could have a future of mining in space that relies on these huge machines being taken from Earth into space. Launch costs would be absolutely massive because they're simply so heavy. So this is one scenario that can be linked on Earth and in space. And then last but not least, 3D printing. We can see this benefiting a huge variety of sectors on Earth, but it's also beneficial if we take this forward into space, because that would eradicate the need to build and transport equipment from Earth into space. So these are the 5 topics that we have established as potential ideas, but they're no means exhaustive. This list is by no means exhausted. We're really happy to receive other ideas for products and services that can be applied on Earth and in space in the future. So how can you apply for this competition? I think the first thing I would recommend is to visit the webpage, because this opportunity is actually live, so you can already download the official competition documents. There's a document called the Statement of Work, which explains a lot more about the kind of ideas that we want to see, more about the kind of work that would be undertaken in that year. So the first kind of recommendation is to go and visit that webpage. Next thing is to check that your team is eligible for funding for this competition. Now, I know that Space Resources Week is hugely international, and so it's just to address this from now, for this competition, the European Space Agency is only able to fund certain member states, and they are all based in Europe. Now, that's not to say teams can't be made up of European and non-European entities. That's absolutely fine. But ESA wouldn't be able to support the non-European entity in that scenario. So step one, check that your team is eligible for funding. Step two, if you are eligible for funding, contact your national delegate because you need a letter of authorization. You can visit that webpage and it gives you all the contact details. Next step would be to register your team, download the competition documents, and then prepare your proposal. And then you just need to make sure that you're submitting your proposal before the 30th of June. So you have a while to put it together. Now, a couple of tips for applying. If you take these 6 points into account, you're off to a winning start. Before you apply, just check that the idea that your team is proposing could become operational on Earth in the near future. Here we're talking about something between 1 to 4 years. We're really looking to create products and services that can go into the market in the near future to be tested, to investigate the business plan and so on. However, the idea must be relevant to future operations in space. Make sure that your team is eligible. Ensure that your proposal covers not just the technical aspects. So this competition is really about trying to investigate the whole ecosystem behind the idea. It's the technology, it's the business aspect too, and it's the roadmap, so the plan for the future. Probably the most important point on this list is point number 5. Make sure that there's a market for your service on Earth. Make sure that you already know who could be a potential user of your product or service, and explain how they would be involved in the study if you've already engaged with the potential users. And then last but not least, just ensure that your study isn't just a pure research and technology development activity. It shouldn't just be focusing on developing the technology in a lab. We really want to see the plan to roll this out on Earth in the near future. So with that, I'm really happy to answer any questions. I'll also jump onto the chat room as soon as I stop sharing these slides. We've also got a LinkedIn group, so you can continue the conversation later if anything comes to mind, or if you want to connect with other teams, you can join that LinkedIn group. And yeah, please visit the webpage for more information. So I'll just pause there to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Liz, and for all of that exciting information. I do believe that Joseph has a few questions for you.
Exactly. Thank you, Liz, for the presentation. And there's already big interest here. As you can see, a redundancy with my computer is not only good in space to have, but sometimes you also need it on Earth. So I'm online again. The first question was again here from Luxembourg, was Julien Villamasson from Moonscape. The question was, Moonscape has an orbital mapping project. Would that qualify for the funding opportunity?
If it's just focusing on the in-space element, I'm afraid to say it wouldn't be eligible. Really, the focus is on having a product or service focused on an Earth-based sector first. So the idea within this study would be to reach out to potential users on Earth first, to develop a proof of concept that would fulfill their needs, and then to consider how would you take this, if it's worth pursuing, how would you take this idea from just an idea on paper, from just a proof of concept phase, to an actual operational product or service on Earth. The in-space element has to be there because we want to see this viable roadmap for how it could be rolled out in space. We want to understand, if we consider a future space economy, who would the users of this service or product be? But I can't stress it strongly enough. The main focus is definitely on the Earth-based use case. And we stress that if you download the competition documents and the proposal template, we guide you there in the kind of answers we would like to see with regards to how you've engaged with this Earth-based sector. So hopefully that's helpful. But if it's just an in-space idea, and there's no application on Earth, then I'm afraid it wouldn't be applicable for this competition.
Okay, thank you for that. The link to the ITT has also been shared in the chat, so people can just
Great.
click on it and can read the documents. Next one is, well, what would today be a presentation without a question from Jerry Sanders? So he's asking, there was one slide, I think the third last is number 5. You probably know what is meant, aimed at reducing logistics at the mine site for wear, repair, or just a general manufacturing goal?
Is this number 5, so topics relating to 3D
I suppose
printing?
it is, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
Is number 5 aimed at reducing logistics at the mine site for wear and repair, or just a general manufacturing goal?
So it could be applied to various sectors. Definitely, if we look at the mining sector, that first suggestion is exactly would fall directly under this eligibility for the competition. But if we take, for example, disaster scenarios where it would be useful to be able to manufacture something on site using a 3D printer, then that would be a viable use case as well. So I think that's a really important point to make, is that although we've been in conversation with mining companies in preparing this competition, your idea doesn't have to be limited to just the mining sector. It can apply to any sector on Earth. And although we can only directly fund European teams, the product or service can be rolled out anywhere on Earth. So it's not just for mining. It can be applied to logistics, transport, oil and gas, and so on. So it can be both of the suggestion that Jerry made.
Great, thank you for that answer. Just a quick last one. A list of the eligible countries was posted in the chat. And Amara Grabs noticed that Latvia, as an ESA associate member, doesn't qualify. Is that true, or?
Yeah, that's true. So the list of countries that are eligible are posted on the web page, and you'll notice that for this competition, as well as some associate member states, as well as, for example, Canada, that aren't eligible. Any team based in the UK or Germany is also not eligible for this competition. But there are alternative ways that you can get involved and get funding for this kind of service development. So the first thing would be to check the webpage to see which countries are eligible and to get in touch with the relevant national delegation.
Great, perfect, thank you. So.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Joseph, for keeping a strong eye on the chat between your various electronic devices next to you, etc. And Liz, what I'm thinking as I hear about this, it might be lovely, along with the presentations for the end of the week, we can accumulate and accrue all of the various job openings and competitions and ways to get involved and apply for funding. So I'm sure we can put together a page of those at the end of the week, because it's so valuable for so many of the people who are highly involved on the chat.